But thanks to some rumors, fan outcry, and a little teasing here and there from Sony themselves, we finally got exactly what we wanted. Crash was also tossed into Skylanders, but hey, that's already in the past, and we at least got some pretty cool figures out of it. To say that I was ridiculously hyped to finally play this would really do my level of excitement no justice. But without any further ado, no more small talk here and there, let's finally dive in. Luckily, Vicarious Visions is at the helm, who are responsible for the not amazing but still pretty good Crash Bandicoot GBA games. Hey, it's better than nothing. But boy, they certainly had a whole lot of work ahead of them. They couldn't simply up-res the graphics and then boom, ship it. Don't get me wrong here, the original Crash trilogy are classics, but they definitely need some polishing up, especially Crash 1. So, two general things needed to be improved on with the Sane trilogy as a whole: presentation and gameplay. What's interesting with Crash Bandicoot as a trilogy is each game is pretty drastically different from each other, so there's a lot to consider with each one. The first game starts off pretty simple. You progress from grasslands and rivers to mysterious bridges and factories, all to save your creepily curvy girlfriend. No amount of remastering is gonna make that any less weird. The second game, Cortex Strikes Back, introduces a warp room that allows the game to maintain the realistic vibes of the level themes, but does a whole lot more with it. You got snow areas, the sewers, you can ride a jet board, you even go into space! All of this to gather up crystals to, quote unquote, help Dr. Cortex save the world. Yeah, you're full of crap, Cortex. The name of the game already spoils your plan. And Crash 3 really just went crazy. Time travel is now involved. So now you travel to places like the prehistoric era, ancient Egypt, the Arabian Nights, and boy, there are vehicles aplenty. Riding a motorcycle in the 1950s, riding a little tiger on the Great Wall of China. They also gave Crash a bazooka. It's very confusing. I like it, it's just very confusing. All of this is done to gather up even more crystals to stop Cortex and the evil mask Uka Uka from taking over the world. Basically, there is a whole lot of different stuff going on in each game that had to not only be maintained, but also updated to attempt to please fans, new and old. And prepare yourself, I am probably going to be fanboying all over this quite a lot. Immediately upon starting any of the games up, the opening cutscenes are perfect. To say the animations have been improved upon would really be underselling just how good they look. The voice acting is top-notch too, bringing back familiar voice actors from more recent games that recite the original lines word for word. As someone who has played through the originals dozens of times, it just made me really happy seeing these classic scenes upgraded to this level. There are even some new details here and there, such as Tawna actually fighting back, rather than just sort of standing there awkwardly. Something she did a lot of back in the day. Oh hey, look at that, Nathan Drake. Neat. And I also gotta say, Coco is absolutely adorable. Also, she was totally watching Uncharted. She has good taste. And hey, speaking of, you can actually play as Coco throughout most of the 3 games too. She plays exactly the same, but still, it's pretty cool. And it actually makes sense in the canon. She's actually traveling back through time through the Time Twister machine to help her brother out on his adventures. Oh man, she is the greatest. Now for those of you who are unfamiliar, themes aside, gameplay is very similar in concept throughout all 3 games. You got a bunch of linear hallway-like levels that play out from either behind or from the side, with the occasional mid-level backtracking, which, yes, is just about as annoying as it was back in the day. It really doesn't matter what you do to it, pissing it away will continue to be the bane of my existence. Also, yes, haha, pissing it away. Whether or not that level of authenticity is a good or bad thing is entirely up to you. I am honestly totally fine with it since I'm used to the classics, but some newcomers may have a rough time. It's not as difficult as, say, Dark Souls, but really, what is? And graphically, the games are now gorgeous, presented to us in glorious 4K resolution. God, I hate that so much. There are so many different landscapes throughout all three adventures, and they really pop out a whole lot more than before. And a really neat new touch, levels with similar themes will typically end up looking slightly different now, meaning each stage also does a better job of standing out. Turtle Woods being rainy and the pits being sunny is a perfect example. Although a few of the enemies do look a little off in comparison with the original, like the penguins here, they kinda just look better in the originals, and these birds, they just look weird. But really, that's the best I got in terms of looking worse. The soundtracks have also been faithfully remastered. While the original composer, Josh Mansell, didn't return, the tunes overall still sound great. And again, in terms of the first game needing improvements, some of the songs in the original were mostly ambience for something like Slippery Climb, but now it has a much more prominent melody, making for a much better track. It's just good stuff all around. And I can also say with confidence that, while not 100% accurate, Crash controls just like he did back in the day, and even a little bit smoother. To be fair, it may be that the game just does a bit of a better job with visual cues, but Crash 1 is nowhere near as difficult as the PS1 version. Don't get me wrong though, still hard. Like the same goes for the hog levels. Between the smoother controls and the sharper visuals, these felt a lot easier too. One of the most obvious problems with the original Crash 1 was needing to basically perfect every single level, breaking all of the crates without dying at all to get the gems. Luckily, you can now die as many times as you please. Oh my god, thank you! Although you do actually need to do some levels without dying to get the special color gems, which is a nice compromise. Until you remember that Slippery Climb is one of those levels. There's actually going to be DLC for Crash 1 that supposedly contains Stormy Ascent, which was a removed level from the original Crash 1, which is just a harder version of Slippery Climb, a level that's already considered to be one of the hardest in the game. Aren't you excited? I am. Time trials were added to the first two games as well. In Crash 3, they were already there, and actually required to get access to the last few levels, and while they still are, the ones in the first two are totally optional. They even added the speed shoes from Crash 3 into 2, and it totally fits. Crash 1's design is so restricted that I'm fine with just sticking to my natural speed. Except when you're trying to get all the platinum relics, and then the platinum relic in the lab, you have to do some insane frame perfect movements. Still got every single platinum relic though. Now, I don't mean to brag. Yes I do. Crash Bandicoot 1 definitely needed the most changes out of all three games. Just the fact that you can now save between every level as opposed to every couple of levels, maybe, is a huge improvement. Some stuff, however, simply couldn't be saved if they were truly sticking to a one-to-one recreation. The game's pacing is just off. Some levels are long, some levels are short, some are really hard, the next one may be really easy, and all of this is seemingly happening at random, but hey, that's how the original was. That being said though, I still had a blast being able to play through this game without the constant fear of dying. Combined with the much tighter controls, even Slippery Climb, which I joke about, was a much more enjoyable time. I always really loved the very natural feeling of the game's worlds, as opposed to the over-the-top extravagance you would expect in a 3D platformer. But going back to the issue of pacing, the bosses remain pretty easy and not all that interesting. But man, bless Vicarious Visions, they certainly tried. Papu Papu now has 5 hit points as opposed to 3. Ooh. And done. Ripper Roo's iconic laugh is gone too, which is super disappointing. His current one is okay, but come on, you can't top the classic. And I don't care what anyone says, the skinny legs on Koala Kong still weird me out. Good God, man, do not skip leg day. Bottom line though, nitpicks aside, This is the definitive version of Crash 1. Though, admittedly, it really wouldn't take much to make Crash 1 better. But hey, at least they did it. That's awesome. As for Crash 2, Cortex Strikes Back, aka the best one, all that really needed to be done was put on a fresh coat of paint. That's really it. The level designs are still really fun. And with Crash's new moveset like a nice slide jump, simply traversing the levels is a lot more enjoyable. The adventure follows the same natural feeling environments of before, but with a nice much needed dose of variety, such as controlling a jetboard, riding a polar bear, and there's even a jetpack. The game still maintains the core hallway design with all of these different gimmicks, without ever feeling overbearing. Polar does feel a bit off compared to the original, but I wouldn't really say worse, just slightly different. The game also introduced a lot more personality, with little cutscenes that'll pop up from time to time in the warp room, and with all of the new animations, I can watch Cortex lie through his teeth all day. He looks damn good doing it. And also Coco shows up every now and then, and she is just, again, she's just really precious. The room could be a bit darker though, the atmosphere was still better in the original. The bosses are really cool too. Shout out to Tiny Tiger for being cool looking and not, and oh man, something I was really hoping they would do. Crash now properly tosses Wumper Fruit at Engine instead of them just materializing. I take it back, Vicarious Visions. Good on you guys. And wow, they even made the final boss better too. Now it takes a lot longer, and this is totally awesome. They actually gave a reason as to why you're chasing him in the first place. I totally forgot that Cortex had a crystal before the adventure even started, so instead of just flying away, he's making his way back to his ship with that one crystal in hand, and I really love that detail. Man, you guys, Crash 2 is just really good. In terms of what needed improving, the same kinda goes for Crash 3. Just take the original, make it pretty, that's it. I will say though, after playing all 3 games back to back, which is something I haven't done in quite a while, Crash 3, I actually like a little bit less than I thought I did. I honestly think the adventure goes for far too much variety now. And while some of it is certainly enjoyable, some of it is just okay. The water levels kinda stink. Dealing with the other racers can still be super frustrating when you're aiming for first place, and the plane gameplay is just sorta there. And actually, this is kinda bizarre, the jet ski levels are the only thing in the entire collection that end up feeling worse. It's really weird, every other gameplay style feels totally fine, but the jet ski simply has looser controls, and when compared side to side with the original, you can see just how slow you turn in comparison. I got used to them in time, so they're definitely not bad, but the original definitely did it better. None of this stuff is outright terrible, but Crash definitely shines the brightest in its core platforming, and I just wish there was more of that here. The bosses remain pretty cool too. Tiny Tiger looking as sweet as ever, Entropy still looks fairly menacing, and the fight against Engine is actually super cool now, but come on, you already know, my man Dingodile is still the king. Ultimately, I still do love Crash 3, just not as much as the polished Crash 2, and even the improved Crash 1. And just like the original, I absolutely love these enemies in particular. He tries his hardest to get to you, but you just simply pass by his obstacles and he's like, oh no, he's totally gonna spin into me, isn't he? I still have a whole life ahead of me. Please just tell my wife that I love her. So I may not like Crash 3 as much as I used to, or as much as some of you guys out there may still do. But that really doesn't matter, the game is still awesome, and really, bottom line, Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy is fantastic. It is exactly what we've been asking for what feels like forever. A better and prettier Crash 1, a prettier Crash 2, and a prettier Crash 3. I am just so happy that this is finally a thing. These 3 games are certainly relics of time, but remember, this is a series that started before 3D platformers were really a huge deal and developers really knew how to make them. And it managed to still properly compete with Mario for a short time.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Crash Bandicoot has a place in history. These games deserved a modern day spotlight. And while the original versions will continue to be a huge part of my childhood, Sane Trilogy is now the way to go to play some good old classic Crash. Also, can't forget about this guy. Fake Crash is here as well. Look at this majestic fool. Video game remakes are like my favorite thing going on nowadays. You know, taking these games from the 90s that were beloved and polishing them up with modern day technology. I gotta say, in 2019, remakes are doing better than they ever have. Well, typically. And personally speaking, based on just pure nostalgia, seeing Crash Bandicoot in the limelight once again, can I really ask for much more? I mean, I could, but that would just be overkill. Crash Bandicoot The Insane Trilogy was a fantastic set of remakes of the original games that made the orange fuzzball a popular name in the first place. The team at Vicarious Visions did a fantastic job handling the classics that Naughty Dog made 20 years prior. Crash was considered PlayStation's mascot for a reason. But even though they were soon after no longer working on that franchise, they also made Crash Team Racing before moving on. And man, I absolutely love this game, man. It is easily one of the most fun kart racers ever made. It does kind of fit into the Mario Kart clone moniker, but I would argue that it was even better than the game that it was directly going up against. If only this game got a remake as well to follow up the Insane Trilogy. Oh boy, look at that. Oh wow, holy crap, they remade the game's pre-title screen opening. That's amazing. I was so disappointed that the Insane Trilogy didn't remake the original game's title screens. It's minor for sure, but I thought they added a lot to the game's charm. Oh man, I am already in love here. Crash suffers from jaw pain. This is the best game in the franchise. So for those who never got around to experiencing the fantastic original game, Crash Team Racing's playstyle is one of those easy to play, hard to master deals. It's all about nailing your drifts and boosting like crazy. Very satisfying, but it takes a lot of time to utilize it ideally. Some of the shortcuts in these tracks are totally ridiculous to pull off, and the items are handled in a bit of a unique way. They're the standard fare. If you played any kart racer before, you know what to expect, but by collecting and maintaining 10 Wumpa Fruit, not only do you gain some extra speed, but now items are more powerful as well. It actually is a lot to factor in, and the higher that you raise the difficulty, the more required it is to master all of these mechanics at the same time. And the game doesn't necessarily teach you a lot of these things in depth. It's really up to you by playing and bettering yourself with trial and error. Huh, what is this? The Dark Souls of kart racers? Please, stop. The controls were easily the best part of the original game, and I am happy to report that the team at Beanox nailed it here. It plays fantastically. And what better way to test your skills than with a fully fledged adventure mode with an honest-to-goodness plot to tie it all together. Introducing the alien, Nitrous Oxide. He wants to take over the planet and turn it into a parking lot, but he'll only do it if he can outrace the fastest racer on Earth. And yeah, that's it. Boom, compete with everybody, claim that title, and send Oxide packing back home to Gasmoxia. I always thought that having a story mode in a genre that never usually has one is really cool. Diddy Kong did the same thing, and it was neat there as well. Adventure mode was how I spent most of my time with this game back in the day, and I am so happy to see it perfectly recreated here, expansive hub world and all. Aku Aku also no longer suffers from whatever medical condition he clearly had in the original, so that's nice. It is ultimately still pretty repetitive to complete 100% because there are only 18 tracks spread throughout the entire world, and to go for full completion, you have to play each one multiple times with some different objectives. Luckily, the game is a ton of fun, so it's not a huge deal. That's how it was in the original as well, but here in Nitro Fueled, you get at least one new thing at the end of like every single race, so that's pretty cool. And then we gotta talk about the visuals. Wow. You know, it's one thing to simply take a classic game and make it look better, but it's another to take so many creative liberties with it while also sticking to the context of the world that you're working in. For instance, Hot Air Skyway is a great classic level where you race against Pinstripe as a boss. However, it never really made a whole lot of sense to why you would race him in the sky. You just sorta did. Well, not anymore. Now it is an airborne casino with his face plastered all over it. It's perfect. This attention to detail is found everywhere in the game, including those pre-boss cutscenes getting a massive facelift. Now, if Nitro Fueled was just a pure remake of Crash Team Racing, we'd be good. You know, it's a little bit on the short side, but overall, totally faithful to the original, and it is so much fun to play. However, the team at Beatnox did something unthinkable. They went above and beyond. They acknowledged the post-Naughty Dog games. With this new Crash Bandicoot revival heavily leaning on the PlayStation 1 games and not really anything else, I totally expected anything post-Crash Bash to be completely lost to time. I don't think anybody played Crash Boom Bang and went, oh yeah, I really need more of that Viscount guy. But when discussing Crash's time behind the steering wheel, likely without a driver's license, how can we forget about these two other console Crash racing games? I've already gone over how lame tag team racing is, but Nitro Kart, that was a pretty fine game. It was really just more of the same though, and not as good. It simply just felt like a sloppier version of CTR. It did have plenty of potential though, another fully fledged story mode, you got some decent theming and track design. It was just bogged down by not playing as well as the game it was mimicking. So, fast forward to Nitro Fueled, what does that game do? Well, it practically acts like a full remake of that game as well. Oh, Nitro Fueled, oh, okay. Yeah, I get it now. Karts, characters, every single track, all of the core content found in Nitro Kart is here, given the same amount of love and attention as the stuff pulled from Team Racing. And these are honestly some of my favorite tracks in the entire game as well. I never really played a whole lot of Nitro Kart growing up, so these were more or less brand new tracks for me to play on with CTR's awesome controls, which was so much fun. Also, major props to the creative liberties taken with these stages as well. Inferno Island in CNK is very similar to Crash Cove in CTR, but plenty of changes were made in this remake to prevent it from feeling like the same stage all over again. The few instances of anti-gravity stuff that was in that game got cut for the sake of consistency, which is a bit of a shame, but it really doesn't detract from how good these tracks are. Bringing in the entirety of adventure mode from that game would have been cool though, as a means to incentivize players to master these tracks. They're all simply kept within the game's menus, so if you want to play them, you have to dig for them, and you get no real reward for doing so. They even come with their own token and time trial challenges. It just would have been cool if you were rewarded for playing them like you are with the tracks from CTR. It also would have simply served a good purpose for the players who are new to Crash, since they're probably going to see a fat mime and come up with a million questions. All of the battle mode maps from Nitro Kart were brought over as well. Now maybe it's just me and the household I grew up in, but I barely ever got to play the original PlayStation with other people. Nintendo got the priority there. So even though I played a ton of Crash Team Racing growing up, this is my first time experiencing that game's multiplayer, and yeah, it's really fun. There are multiple modes to play in, from capture the flag to last man standing to collecting a bunch of crystals and holding onto them, and 12 maps to play on from both games. And with the whole Wumpa Fruit powering up items mechanic in this mode as well, it's almost a bit more chaotic than the current leader of battle mode in kart racers, Mario Kart. I really hope that in the future, Nitro Fueled maintains a healthy online community, because me and my evil little penguin buddy here are ready to take down all of you fools. Oh, and yeah, no worries, Penta Penguin makes his grand return as well, who, like the original, is only unlockable via a cheat code, and his main catchphrase is Penguin Yay 1. This is because in the American version of the original game, there was some accidental dialogue pieces left over in that game's code, where one of the people on the development team said,
Penguin Yay 1?
That level of dedication, man, that's awesome. Crash Bandicoot makes his very first ever modern appearance. All of the bosses from Nitro Kart are playable as well, including that weird egg boy entrance. And who can forget about Zim and Zam? I know who they are, and even I don't really know who they are. There's a ton of customization options with color changes, aesthetic car modifications. Characters also have costumes that radically change their look, and they come with a unique victory animation on top of that. All of this takes Crash Team Racing from a really good kart racer to an awesome source of Crash Bandicoot fan service. Content from Crash Tag Team Racing is kept to a minimum here. You gotta remember that game was totally different and pretty dumb. Only a couple of karts from that game make an appearance, but as for the future, well, that's what the DLC is for. In my opinion, post-launch DLC, especially if it's free, is totally okay in my book. Nitro Fueled is going to be getting a ton of brand new content, not rehashed content from other Crash games, totally brand new stuff. One of the most exciting parts about this game, at least around launch, is the addition of Grand Prix. These are essentially going to be timed events that give the players access to new items, new tracks that are thematically inspired by the Crash universe and design-wise inspired by Crash Tag Team Racing, and even brand new playable characters. Tawna is in fact going to be in the game, as well as the old trophy girls, now known as the Nitro Squad. Baby Crash and Coco are supposed to be a thing as well. They don't currently exist, so that's gonna be weird. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled is fantastic. It's as good as we all figured it would be, but it has gone above and beyond to please the Crash Bandicoot fans who have been sifting through years of abuse and neglect, and I hope that finally the world will soon see a brand new Crash Bandicoot adventure, not just a polished up old one. Man, you know, for the longest time the original Crash Team Racing remained one of the best kart racers ever made, but I am confident in saying that this remake has usurped that game's standing by a mile. Now, how this game stands up against the Crash racing games on mobile, I don't know, but something tells me that Nitro Fueled is still the better choice there. It is also worth mentioning that the PlayStation 4 version has some exclusive content, a couple of retro skins, and a low poly version of an already existing track. It's hardly something worth choosing this game for one console over another, thankfully, but it's at least kinda cool if you consider Crash Bandicoot a PlayStation-based franchise all these years later. People are gonna be really quick to compare this to other modern-day kart racers, but not me. I am simply happy that we have a good handful of racing games similar to how it was back in the 90s. Simply on the Switch alone, man, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Team Sonic Racing, Crash Team Racing Nitro Kart, Hello Kitty Cruisers. Finally, after years of mediocrity and nothing short of abuse for our beloved Orange Marsupial, the sequel that we have all been wanting is here. Crash 4. Wrath of Cortex. Original joke, please do not steal. To say I've been waiting ever so patiently for a proper sequel to Crash 3 Warped would be one hell of an understatement. Not just 3 months from the reveal to the release, not just 3.5 years from Crash's initial return to Spotlight in Skylanders, something most of us try to forget, but roughly 19 years since the original Crash 4 was a big disappointment. Not to say the series has been devoid of fun ever since, you know, I think the console and DS versions of Crash of the Titans are pretty solid, the GBA games are really good side-scrolling adaptations of the winning formula, and Twin Sanity, despite being a broken mess, is one hell of a fun broken mess. Admittedly, even Wrath of Cortex can be kinda fun once you look past Cortex's million teeth. The Insane trilogy was a massive success and is, in my opinion, the best way to experience those original games, and CTR Nitro Fueled may be one of the greatest kart racers of all time. With content and fan service for miles, it's awesome. Crash Bandicoot's comeback thus far has been, in my opinion, fantastic. But all of that has been leading to this specific moment, a brand new game by brand new developers with an attempt to finally push the series forward. I know it sounds cliched and the pun is entirely intended. It's about time. Fun little detail here, so despite the Insane trilogy being made by Vicarious Visions, Crash 4 was actually developed by Toys for Bob, the same team responsible for the Spyro Reignited trilogy. And look at that, they both have a very similar initial loading screen. My boys are finally under one competent roof. This immediately puts a smile on my face, and I haven't even seen the title screen yet. Just gotta agree to all these agreements. Yep, sell my soul to Activision, that's fine. I'm here to play Crash, none of this stuff bothers me, it's okay, I'll sell my soul to the devil, no big worries. Right off the bat, the new theme song is a jam. Listen, much love to the Time Twister theme from Crash 3. That song got me through the very late 90s, but I've had the Crash 4 theme stuck on my head for weeks. It's so catchy, I love it. So this new adventure starts off doing a great job being a proper follow-up to Crash 3. Dr. Neo, Cortex, and Entropy have been banished to the past. Thankfully, we get to skip past the entirety of them growing up once again, but in the time that passed, they have been constantly trying to escape with Uka Uka's powers. Many times they failed, but finally, in this one instance, they succeed. Naturally, Aku Aku can sense this, so now it is up to Crash and Coco to save the day once again, this time with the assistance of the Quantum Masks to help our heroes traverse space and time. The good guys gotta stop the bad guys, but now you travel through different dimensions across space and time. A simple premise with some teleportation shenanigans that is exactly what Crash needs. It also continues the original trilogy's trend of starting off a new game exactly where the last one ended off. I love that. It's all about the different characters and all of the interactions that take place throughout. That is where the plot truly shines. Crash Bandicoot initially started off being inspired by cartoons of that generation, and this feels more like a proper fleshed out cartoon than ever before. The voice acting is top notch. I adore all of these redesigns. Watching these characters do anything was an absolute joy. You can tell this is where that Toys for Bob team really shines. The Spyro cutscenes were fantastic, and that same level of love is shown here. And hey, this is the first time N. Gin and N. Brio have been in the same room outside of any spin-offs, so that's pretty neat. Heading into a full-on Crash Bandicoot 4, there are some pretty big shoes to fill. Clearly they need to stick to the hallway-based level design that was the series staple, but it is kinda hard to imagine just how they would modernize it. Fun and challenging levels that go in a straight line are what is most important for Crash after all, and as we've discussed in the past, nobody else knew how to do it either. Now that I've played through it, I've gone through multiple stages a ton of times, I can happily answer the question, did they manage to succeed in doing so? Oh my god, this game is so good. So it turns out the solution to that problem all along is to make the stages absolutely massive, as well as letting you play as Coco right off the bat. That's very important. Things are just as linear as they've always been, but we are still traversing giant landscapes now. And with the camera constantly rotating around you, it makes these areas feel a whole lot bigger than they actually are. Compared to the previous games, man, these places are gigantic. The original way of doing things is still fine, if the Insane Trilogy being a ton of fun is any indication of that, but that was still under the guise of being an old game remastered. This is exactly what Crash needed in modern times. Before they go ahead and try more open world stuff again. I'd be down for that, by the way. And it also helps that these locations feel so organic. The designers clearly went the extra mile to contextualize every single thing you jump across. It makes these worlds feel alive, and for me, that is what makes a truly fantastic level in a platformer. A pirate-filled cave that leads to treasure, jumping across prehistoric wildlife before being chased by a big angry boy, a New Orleans-inspired Mardi Gras party, easily my favorite level in the game. Holy cow, it was so good. The variety is off the charts here, if you couldn't tell. No two stages really feel alike. It's not perfect, but in regards to a casual run of the game on your first time through, it's a constant joy seeing just what's gonna happen next on your path. You know, speaking of jumping across dinosaurs, these dinos right here make me want a remaster of Bugs Bunny Lost in Time. Am I greedy? I'm probably greedy. And then there's the world structure, which is totally linear as well. The warp room and time twister design is totally iconic for sure, but by sticking to an approach more akin to Crash Bandicoot 1, it allows the difficulty to ramp up a whole lot smoother, as well as have the gimmicks be better interwoven throughout the stage's narrative, rather than, oh, every time you go to China, it's the tiger level, have fun. Crash Bandicoot Goes to War, remember that one? The Bandicoots basically have their entire moveset right from the get-go, and the platforming is constantly putting those moves to the test, which is where the quantum masks start to shine. There are 4 of them that'll pop up in levels whenever the layout sees fit, giving you abilities like phasing platforms in and out of existence, flipping gravity at the push of a button, slowing down time, and pulling off a gravity-defying super spin that can deflect specific projectiles. Initially, I thought these moves would have felt super forced, but just like any other level gimmicks that happen throughout the game, these are implemented brilliantly in the level design and continue to stick with Crash's tried and true difficult reflex platforming. Oh man, and that's not even counting the wall running and the grinding. There is so much going on your path from point A to point B, and it all ultimately still feels like a genuine evolution of Crash's original abilities. Top marks all around. If there's any downside, it's that sometimes I kind of forget Aku Aku is a thing. Alright, you exist, because I'm taking damage so many times, the chances of me actually hitting the invincibility mask was next to impossible. And before you pull out the constantly hilarious Dark Souls comparison, yes, Crash 4 is pretty tough. Oh, it's a good thing they included that retro mode, so now instead of infinite lives, you get to see a game over screen every now and then. That's nice. Yeah, I don't know, man, I don't see the appeal of that. Just go modern, you'll be better off. Again, the difficulty ramps up smoothly thanks to the world structure, but make no mistake about it, these designers knew exactly what Crash was always about, and that is being super tough. By the end of the adventure, that's when you get to see the mask gameplay really hit its true potential. I won't spoil it here, but man, that final level has you pulling some finger gymnastics that I was both hoping this game would have and dreaded actually doing it. My poor thumbs, they hurt so much. Let's be real here, Activision is probably going to throw DLC into the game at some point, but if said DLC includes a challenge world which has levels that require masterful precision with each of the characters, then I'm all in. But that's not even going over all of the extra characters you can play as. Joining Crash and Coco Bandicoot, we have Dr. Neo Cortex, Alternate Universe Tawna, really digging that redesign by the way, and the thick boy himself, Dingodile. All three of these characters have playstyles that do fall in line with the traditional gameplay, but all have their own unique quirks. Cortex has a transformation blaster, which can make platforms out of enemies. Tawna has a grappling hook, which leads to some really cool set pieces, as well as boxes hidden way off in the back that you're able to shoot from a distance. And Dingodile has a vacuum gun, which you can use for both platforming and collecting. And also, he's thick. Did I mention that part? He is very, very thick, and that does play a vital part in the story. The bulk of their gameplay time is actually optional. There is a mandatory level that you go through when you get to that part of the story, but after that, there are multiple levels that'll pop up along the way, and whether or not you do them is entirely your choice. The interesting thing though is these stages give you a good understanding of how they play into the story, usually assisting Crash and Coco in different ways without them ever knowing it. This massive truck just happens to stall before it chases you? Well, that was actually Tawna messing with the machinery. It's a really cool idea, and it emphasizes that whole making levels feel alive thing. I love it. Of the three, I think I would say Cortex is my least favorite because he lacks any sort of double jump, but man, when I hear of extra playstyles in my platformers, I immediately start thinking of Sonic Adventure or Spyro 3, and I can happily say this is definitely on the better side of things. I thought there was going to be like an entire world dedicated to playing as Cortex when I really just want to play as Crash, and thankfully, that's not a thing. It is very clear that Toys for Bob had a ton of ideas, and they managed to implement all of them without ever losing sight of Crash's core vision. Tattoos, beat-em-up gameplay, leveling up abilities, nah. This is more like it. It's fast, it's frantic, it's satisfying, man. I love this game so much. Like the large level designs I mentioned earlier, it's not all perfect, but, well, let's get to that. So Crash 4 kinda has three major categories to consider here. On a casual run, this is all fantastic. The levels are so brightly colored and varied and challenging. The characters all play really well. The soundtrack is honestly some of the best the franchise has seen yet. And while playing, I honestly couldn't help but think of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which excelled in all of those things as well. Aside from that though, there's all of the side content you can dive into, as well as your quest to 100% completion. Those last two are where things get a little bit iffy. Now, I can't help but imagine Donkey Kong 64 when I wrote this part of the script, so oh boy, here we go. Rather than collecting one crystal and one or two gems in the stages, each level has a whopping 6 gems, rewarded for collecting 80% of the Wumpa Fruit, breaking all the boxes, completing a level in 3 lives or less, and finding a hidden gem, of which, oh man, are they ever hidden. The gem in Run It By You is ridiculous, oh my goodness, I can't believe they hit it where they hit it. Collecting gems doesn't just give you a special ending, but actually it counts towards giving you costumes, all of which are amazing. Look at this balloon Crash, this is Cursed, and Big Horn Energy Coco, this is Blessed. But oh man, I'm a few gems short. Well, every single stage has an inverted variant, not only mirroring the screen, but also throwing in visual effects and sometimes changing the speed, having an additional group of gems to collect as well as a relocated hidden gem. The colored gems return as well, more hidden than the actual hidden gems are, and I wouldn't even blame you for going online to read up how to do them because oh my goodness, some of these once again I would have not known otherwise. And also, you are still incentivized to perfect stages, since you can only collect the flashback tapes if you get to them without dying yet in that stage. Wow, Activision putting out 2 games back to back with collectible VHS tapes. That's weird. These give you really challenging side-scrolling stages, themed around Cortex's original experiments back when he wanted Crash to be part of his army back in 1996. Makes sense in the story, really fun to play, often challenging, these are pretty great. There's also a low polygon costume, and this is my favorite trend in modern gaming so far. Time trials return, providing the same level of insane muscle memory that you could possibly ask for as a Crash fan, including brand new developer times, stricter time limits than the Platinum Relics, which frankly is terrifying. There's the insanely perfect relics, rewarded for going through a stage, getting 80% of the Wumpa Fruit, breaking all of the crates, all without losing a single life, and oh my god, that's a lot of things. I don't think I can do it. Man, I honestly don't know how to really feel about all this. Having all of these options on hand is great. You know, I'm hardly gonna look at these extra platforming objectives as a downside, especially since the only thing you need to do to get to the game's credits is simply beat the stages, but to be honest, it is kind of overwhelming. Those are just extra items, but remember those extra characters? Well, outside of their mandatory segments in the story, they each have 3 optional stages as part of their timelines. The thing is, they're not full stages. The first half of the stage is playing as them before helping out Crash and Coco, but the other half is the Crash and Coco section that you've already played in the previous level. The crate placement is different, so that's nice, but it's still a shame they're not full stages. When you play through a level in Crash Bandicoot, you're already probably combing that stage from top to bottom, so to do that twice just for the extra boxes, it's fun, but it does feel forced. Once we also consider the inverted stages for both the pure Crash level as well as the extra timeline levels, that's playing through the same locations at least 4 times minimum. Listen, I'm fine with encouraging exploration for completion in my platformers as much as the next guy, but some of the crates and hidden gem locations in these worlds, it's a bit ridiculous. Once again, the hidden gem in Run It By You, absolutely insane. And I've never missed just a couple of boxes so many times in any other Crash game before. It gets to a point where it's not my fault, it's the game's fault. Or it's entirely my fault and I'm just an angry person. I keep bringing up Run It By You. You want a spoiler? You're gonna want a spoiler because you're not gonna find it otherwise. You ready for it? Here you go. You do this, and then you do this. What? Also, in my opinion, the time trials, not really feeling it this time around. I get it, the time relics are a franchise staple. However, I just don't really feel like these stages lend themselves to racing through them as much as the classic games. Even when Crash 1 had the time trial mode slapped into it in the Insane trilogy, it felt a lot more natural than this. They were all glorified straight lines, it fit in perfectly. It could be that I'm just bad at it, which is totally fair, but the level of precision here to get the perfect times that you need is way more precise and strenuous than the previous games. If you fully complete this game and get all of the developer time relics, then you have my utmost respect. I don't think I'll ever do that. But again, let me reiterate, a casual playthrough of this game is incredible, dare I say, one of the best platformers I've played in the last decade. And experimenting with some of these side challenges can be really entertaining as well, but going for 100%, or I guess in this game's instance 106%, it feels like a bit much. That original trilogy certainly had its fair share of garbage, but I guess enough time has passed that 100%ing them doesn't feel impossible, and maybe in time with this one as well, it won't feel like such a daunting task, but right now, just be wary, Crash 4 can be pretty intense. And truthfully, if this stops you from enjoying the game, I can't even necessarily blame you. For me, missing some of the crates in a bunch of levels was exciting and gave me a desire to explore more than ever before, but for others, it might be more of a deterrent to even care about getting these gems in the first place. And I do believe that both of those opinions are valid. I mean, listen, getting all the moons in Mario Odyssey isn't necessarily a blast either. Otherwise though, game's pretty good. But that begs the question, does this even matter? I only started feeling this way after I saw the credits, so the journey and the destination were both fantastic. It's when I decided to go on these extra adventures that I started to drive myself crazy. Everything about this game for me was incredible from start to finish. This may be the best Crash Bandicoot game, honestly. It's too early to definitively say, but it's really that good. It's just that 100%ing it is a bit of a nightmare. I think Toys for Bob got a little too trigger happy with the completion requirements. My goal going into this game was hoping to get a sweet platinum trophy before this video went out, but would have driven myself insane by doing so. Heh. Insane. Another point though, it's really nice seeing such a big budget 3D platformer show up again. If we take a look at the platformers of the years leading up to this, we got Mario, of course, but the most we've gotten lately is from the indies. Fantastic games, don't get me wrong, but aside from these sporadic remasters, it's really rare to see a company put so much time, effort, and money into a 3D platformer that's original. And do not think that goes unappreciated, because as a platformer fan, this is heavenly. The Tropical Freeze comparison really drives the point home, I think. After getting some fantastic returns to form that reminded us that these characters can be part of some great adventures, those successes paved the way for developers to simply let loose, and by doing so, they created some of, if not the, best experiences those characters have been a part of. Now do Spyro. We waited nearly 20 years for this specific moment, and I am very happy to say, is Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time worth it? Absolutely. This game is fantastic. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. It's been a few months since the game initially released, and if you missed that one video where I raved about it for a solid 20 minutes, then you probably missed out on the fact that I love this game, like so much. Getting such a big budget 3D platformer as a true follow-up to the original trilogy, it was awesome. Certainly not without its issues, but a surefire platformer classic all the same as far as I'm concerned. But we fast forward to early 2021 and Crash 4 is now available on a whole bunch of new consoles, which is great. So it doesn't matter what machine you like to play on, you can get your hands on the latest and arguably greatest adventure the marsupial has seen yet. And that's pretty cool. And you know, I never really do videos on upgraded ports like this, but for an opportunity like this, I couldn't help myself. First and foremost, let's talk about the upgrades you get with the PS5 version of the game. This isn't just the same game, but on a different console. Immediately noticeable to me, the game actually looks a lot better. Just on the base settings from my older PS4 footage and my newer PS5 footage, the colors are a whole lot more vibrant and Crash pops off the screen a whole lot more. Possibly in part because you're now able to get 4K resolution out of this as well, at 60 FPS. Oh man, I normally don't care about this kind of stuff, but it makes a good game look even better than it was before. Oh yeah, and there's also a brand new skeleton costume. I figured I should get that part out of the way before people ask why our favorite Bandicoots now look dead all of a sudden. Being on newer, more powerful hardware also means shorter loading times, even when compared to the PS4 version on the PS5's solid-state drive. The native PS5 version is just lightning speeds faster. It certainly wasn't unbearable before, but the fact that they are as short as they are now is just awesome. This is easily one of my favorite aspects of modern console gaming. Man, if you try to go for everything in this game and you're doing dozens and dozens of time trial runs and insanely perfect run attempts, being able to go back to the start of a level in the midst of inevitable frustration is a huge relief. It makes the hurt that much less painful. Also, exclusive to PS5, the game takes advantage of activity cards, tracking your progress through the game as well as letting you fast travel to certain objectives whenever you want. And those sweet adaptive triggers from the DualSense controller get put to use as well. Cortex's blaster, Dingo Dial's vacuum, riding the jetboard, check out how it works for Tano's hookshot. All of these little things make the PlayStation 5 version of Crash 4 feel more unique than the rest, and that is just really cool. Also, probably the best part about this upgrade, Polar's hitbox is now a lot bigger, meaning hitting all of the boxes and bears repeating is no longer the worst thing ever. Oh, thank God. I spent, and I am not even joking here, hours trying to nail this section on my first run, missing the same boxes over and over and over again, all to still be missing some anyway. So it is the same game, but made infinitely better thanks to the new hardware, which is awesome. A full completionist run will still take a whole lot out of you, but all of these little changes ultimately make it a better experience. And you know, that's all fine and good, but I think we need to talk about these. I really don't know how long these are gonna stay on. Can we talk to a doctor? I mean, I know a pretty good witch doctor who doubles as a mask, so that could be very helpful. Also, I feel like going to the bathroom is gonna be made infinitely more difficult with these on. I gotta say, I've never worn something like this before, but I am impressed. The fur is very furry, the leather is very leathery. These certainly feel like the genuine article. Simply comparing them to Crash's actual hands, which are a whole lot easier to see thanks to the next-gen port, yeah, they're pretty spot on. Not a ton of movement though. Wearing it is fine enough, but bending any of the fingers? Yeah, not so much. How does the guy in the big Crash costume pull it off? And when all is said and done, I can happily say Crash 4 is still as awesome as it ever was, made even better with the jump to PlayStation 5. Now, when it comes to the hands, I don't know if I would recommend it, but hey, I can now add this to my legacy. Whoa! With the license to Crash being tossed around to different developers all the time over the years, some less than quality titles were inevitable. And boy, did we get some of those. These aren't necessarily the worst of the worst, but these are games that are certainly bad. So before taking a look at what made Crash great in the first place, it's time to take a look at how far he fell. Starting off here, we have Crash Boom Bang for the DS. It's such a weird name, Boom Bang. I get it, I mean, you had Bash beforehand, so you're just gonna throw out more B words that come to mind? Okay, sure, I can do that too. So in Crash Bada Boom Bada Bing, you have the choice of a few characters to play as, and despite them being concrete characters, you can rename them whatever you like. I get to rename Crash, huh? Alright, let's see here. Ah, perfect. The story begins with this brand new villain, Viscount. Viscount, huh? Something tells me this plot is gonna be about money. He is on pursuit of the super big power crystal, and since he is a millionaire and would rather everybody else do the hard work for him, he challenges the lovable cast of characters, plus a shockingly terrifying looking Aku Aku, to find the crystal. Looks like our lucky break. Wow, what a response. And actually, that's about all the story that we get. The game then quickly begins, and there we go. It's a board game. You see, Crash Bash was only a Mario Party clone in terms of it being minigame based. This is full on, everybody rolls a dice and moves along a board. Although actually, everybody moves at the same time. Take that, Mario. How you win though is pretty weird. Each map has a unique goal to work towards, but having the most overall points is what gets you to win. Meaning it is possible for you to win the board's goal, but not necessarily win the whole thing. Honestly, the game doesn't explain anything. As for the minigames, oh god, they're dreadful. Some of them do kinda harken back to the series past, but most of them are just like, hey, sure, a cartoon Bandicoot riding a realistic horse. That's the weirdest thing I've seen all day. You're also probably wondering now, what's with all the speech bubbles that are popping up? Well, that's the whole boom bang part of the game. You see, when playing multiplayer, you can distract the player in first place with the simple push of a button. And I gotta say, in single player, it's really fun when the minigame you're playing is purely visual based and you can't see a thing. And I'm not even lying, this is the boom bang part of the game, because you can customize it and it automatically says boom or bang. That's it. That's the boom bang. I am like so confused. I don't know what happened here, but Sonic Bada Boom Bada Bing is just terrible. I couldn't even bring myself to complete the really short story mode. I got really close, but I, and actually none of my opponents, were able to discover the last item that we needed to complete the map. It's easy to assume that the portable scene is where Crash had it the worst. I mean, the DS gave us boom bang for crying out loud. And you would also assume that if we went further back down the timeline, oh, the Game Boy Advance, oh no, the GBA and Crash Bandicoot, that has to be a match made in hell, right? I know you're thinking that. Wrong. The Huge Adventure and Entrance are 2D platformers that do end up recycling elements from the PS1 games, but considering those games had plenty of side-scrolling elements, this actually works pretty well, and they're fun. They're certainly better than the fate that Spyro had on the console. And hell, even Crash Nitro Kart was a pretty good game on here. This game really sucks too. Crash Purple Ripto's Rampage. Wait. Ripto? Yeah, that's right. Ripto from the Spyro the Dragon series. And hey, would you look at that, here is Spyro Orange, the Cortex Conspiracy. You got Mario and Sonic, Professor Layton and Phoenix Wright, Kratos and Fat Princess. Alright, maybe not that one. Crossovers are something that video game fans always dream of, and Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon are no exception. Working what seemed like hand in hand during the PlayStation 1 days, so much so that demos of each series were found in the others' games, it didn't really matter to anybody that the original creators no longer had the franchise rights. We wanted a crossover. And well, we got one, I guess. You know what, let's give it a shot. The story begins with Cortex and Ripto concocting a plan to defeat both Crash and Spyro, and their best idea? Put masks of Spyro on the enemies to fool Crash into thinking that Spyro is the bad guy. Oh my god, this is one of the worst games I've ever played. So naturally, Crash goes out to stop whatever bad stuff is going on, and of course, collect crystals and gems along the way. And the way you get them is by completing minigames. Again, some of them do sorta make sense in context of the series, but something like blowing up sheep with the bazooka to prevent them from running into nitro crates, thereby blowing themselves up. I mean, like Boom Bang, I could spend time here talking about the minigames, but they really are just all bad. The entire single-player story mode only takes like 2 hours, and most of the minigames get repeated multiple times. At least it's better than Boom Bang in that respect, because I didn't have to play the same minigame over and over. Just credit where credit is due, I suppose. And hey, Crash brings his own Game Boy Advance on the adventure. Not even he wants to play this crap. Further along in the story, you eventually encounter Spyro, and since they think each other is the bad guy, meaning I guess the bad guy's plan actually kinda worked, they settled their differences by tossing Molotov cocktails at each other over a moat. That's classic Crash. Honestly, nothing else throughout the adventure is even remotely interesting, and things end off with, of course, a fight against both Cortex and Ripto. And when the final boss has a 60-second time limit, you know you're in for a treat. And by treat, I mean it's super easy and shockingly laggy. Spyro promises to help out whenever trouble arises once again. Crash then puts him in a headlock. Done. Oh, and as for Spyro Orange, yeah, that game is even worse. And I think Hunter agrees. But fine, you know what? Maybe talking about 2 minigame collections is not necessarily the best barometer for how bad Crash used to be. I can fix that. Let's take a look at the 2 last console games to ever be released before this game's saved the Bandicoot. Oh boy. Now, I have negatively talked about both of these games before, but honestly, Crash of the Titans? That's actually pretty cool. Rather than being a pure platformer, the developers opted to make a game that's more of a beat-em-up. And aside from moronically locking the spin ability until like 20 minutes into the game, the combat actually works pretty well. It is super simple, Crash is simply fun to control, you level up often, each chapter has certain goals that give you collectibles. It is legitimately a pretty good game. The Wii version even does the whole point to gather items thing 1 month before Super Mario Galaxy did it. And sure, all of the redesigns are pretty weird, and I don't really understand the whole adding tribal tattoos to Crash thing, but if the discussion here is talking about Crash Bandicoot post PS1, I would definitely say at the very least, this is better than Wrath of Cortex. Yeah, that's right, I said it. The main gimmick of the game was the ability to possess a bigger mutant thanks to Aku Aku, which you can then control for a while for more combat. And the game actually does strike a decent balance of Crash gameplay and Mutant gameplay. There's a bunch of different mutants too, so there's quite a bit of variety there as well. So then just how did they completely ruin it in the sequel, Mind Over Mutant? Well, I got a whole list of reasons here. For one, every major cutscene is presented in a different style. You got hand puppets, standard cartoons, black and white, old school superhero cartoons. I mean, I guess they were trying to go for something cute here, like, hey, look at all of the characters in these wacky different styles. But after a game that already completely changed the Crash Bandicoot formula, all of these random cutscene style changes just gives the game a complete lack of identity, when basically all of the plot development is told this way. It's dumb. As for the gameplay itself, honestly, it's just the same but worse. It now goes for a bit of a pseudo-open world thing, though unlike Crash Twinsanity, which actually did that fairly well, this is really just a series of linear pathways leading off of Crash's house, so it's really not open world, and I'm unsure why they went with that idea in the first place. Oh yeah, and some of the characters got redesigned again. I mean, that's a sign of good confidence right there. I don't know who designed both remodels of Crunch, but they're bad. And to be completely honest with you, the game just sort of happens. Your first goal is to gather machine parts for Coco to finish her experiment. This leads to a pretty basic linear area that gives you a good amount of time to get used to how the game plays. And again, since Titans felt okay, this is actually totally fine. You quickly get back to your house and give Coco the parts, and after a cutscene, it's time for the second mission. And then, in no time, the game gets super boring, super quick. You just keep getting told to go down different linear trails, and there's absolutely no challenge whatsoever, just go from point A to point B, constant repetitive combat that never really gets any harder, nearly endless mutant usage, eliminating the whole mutant Crash balance of before, and a ton, and I mean a ton, of backtracking. you have to go back and forth through the snowy area like 3 or 4 times, and it doesn't change. There's a couple new enemies, but you're really just doing the same thing over and over again. And to add fuel to the fire, there's actually one area in the game about halfway through where you randomly teleport to your destination instead of being forced to backtrack and walk there. After already doing a lot of backtracking, I kind of felt offended. And sure, if you haven't played either of these 2 games, much of Mind Over Mutant is going to sound similar to Crash of the Titans. But in Crash of the Titans, you at least had goals within every level of taking out a certain number of enemies or getting a high combo. So while the combat was super simplistic, you still had to do a fairly good job of it. Your combo doesn't go away until you take damage. It's not time-based like in Titans. And there's just no sense of escalation here either. The game never strays away from its basic idea, and when it does, it's usually something pretty dumb. Well, the best part about the game at least is they decided to bring back Embryo. That's cool. This is so weird. Everything about the game seems so poorly done, but Embryo is legitimately really funny. He's constantly going about inventing everything, and even tosses in some random real-world references. He comes off as so over the top and crazy. At one point, he even says he wrote the Bible. I have no idea what happened during this game's development, but Embryo is seriously the only highlight of this game. And then there's a boss fight that he's not even involved in, he's just sort of in the background. And then once that fight is done, he's out of the game. He just goes away as a cute little cartoon, parodying that scene from The Incredible Hulk. What a way to go. Back when this game first came out, I honestly had really high hopes for it after enjoying Titans. But at least now it sort of makes sense how this was the last major Crash Bandicoot game before the series went into a nearly 10-year-long hiatus. Did that spacesuit wearing bird just spread its cheeks and fart poison gas at me? Okay. I need to go lay down. The original trilogy? Awesome. Crash Team Racing? Fantastic. Crash Bash? Crash Bash aside, the Orange Bandicoot was this symbol of excellence in the early years of the PS1. And once the PS2 came around, naturally there was a lot of hype to see the series that you once loved jump ship to greater waters. However, Naughty Dog lost the rights to Crash. Traveler's Tales was set to make the next main game in the series. This is gonna be an adventure. Let's start with the story. Oh boy! Uka Uka has a ring around his glow graphic. We're off to a good start here. So, after multiple failures, Dr. Neo Cortex and company are deciding what to do next. It turns out Cortex has a secret weapon that he's been working on, but he lacks a special power source. Uka Uka suggests getting help from the Elementals, a group of evil masks, each representing a different element. Earth, water, fire, air. I mean, what's next? You're gonna bring back a bad guy you thought was already dead since you were too lazy to come up with someone new? Oh no, wait, I'm sorry, Spyro already has that covered. Thanks to the Elementals, as well as those power crystals Cortex likes so much, he manages to finally harness this new power and bring his secret weapon to life! It's another Bandicoot. Well, I mean, why not? Fight fire with fire, you know what I'm saying? He knows what I'm saying. Ultimately, it's another case of good Bandicoot stops evil Doctor from... I really don't even know. He never really says what his plan is anymore, aside from defeating Crash. What a way to live your life. All jokes aside, I'm actually okay with the whole extra mask thing. Mostly because the developers somehow got a pretty notable voice cast. So Wrath of Cortex already starts off pretty fishy, but when it comes to the level itself, it's a level alright, nothing really too special there. It's your standard run-of-the-mill Crash Bandicoot level, linear hallway, a bunch of enemies, a bunch of boxes, you get the idea. I did also find it really enjoyable doing this whenever I got onto a moving platform. Something about the weird lighting and his weird face made it oddly satisfying. Next up is an airplane level. It's pretty simple, there's a bunch of machines flying around and it's your job to... Third level. Suddenly, Super Monkey Ball! But with the Bandicoot, you get the idea. It's very odd, these are actually kinda fun to play, I just don't know why they're here. Also, for no real reason, all those bosses you once thought were threatening, They're just kinda chilling out as obstacles now. Okay. So after 2 pretty odd vehicle levels, it's time for some good old running and jumping again. And honestly, these levels really aren't all that bad. The level designs are admittedly pretty boring and lack much in terms of challenge, but they play well enough. Is that a dragon? I seriously cannot tell with that face. The final level of the first area takes place in a mine car. That's the big thing with Crash Wrath of Cortex. It's mainly an overload of vehicles. On top of the ones I already covered, there's a Jeep, water level with the occasional Beatles reference, a flying robotic bug, a propeller backpack, but hey, you even get to play as Coco a couple times. She plays like Crash, but not good. Like, what is this move? Good on you, Coco, you go get him. So I just guess the developers looked at Crash 2 and 3, realized that they couldn't possibly top the core platforming they saw, and just decided to throw every idea they had into this new game instead of being kinda clever. Spoiler, it didn't really work. I'm not saying that Crash 2 and 3 simply cannot be topped. I mean, Crash Twinsanity was completely over the top ridiculous, but I loved that game. Wrath of Cortex suffers from an identity crisis. It either wants to emulate the games that made Crash great in the first place, or wants to make sure that every level is different just for the sake of every level being different, regardless if the mechanics are polished or not. Like the water levels. Holy crap, they're bad. I will give the game some credit though, the bosses are actually pretty neat. They're all just an encounter with Crunch. Oh, that's the Bandicoot's name, by the way. Using the power of one of the elementals to help him out. They're not particularly challenging, except for this one because, oh yeah, I saw that coming. But I kinda like the idea of all the bosses being this one enemy using different powers every time. So it's probably the most original thing the game has going for it, so credit where credit is due. And just like Crash 3, once you beat a boss, you get a new ability. They're mostly familiar ones like the Super Spin and Fruit Bazooka, but the big new one of the group is Sneaking, for use when you encounter an obnoxiously long string of Nitro crates. That is literally the only time you will use it. I don't even really have a comment on that one, it's just really dumb. The adventure culminates with a battle against Crunch, Dr. Cortex, and all 4 elementals at once. And it's actually a pretty cool fight, if not a bit too random, but for a final fight, it gets the job done pretty well. After they're all taken care of, we're treated to a cutscene. Now, I didn't get all the gems in my playthrough, because that would require me playing this level again, and I refuse to do that. So instead, Uka Squared goes on to tell us how the bad guys aren't quite done yet, because they still have those precious shiny stones, and thanks to that, they can bring back the elementals as many times as they want, which seems like overkill, but I mean... So no, I didn't go back afterwards and get all the gems, or the time relics for that matter. You do get a few more levels to play by doing so, but honestly, I just could not bring myself to do it. And besides, all that really changes is Crunch turns good, and the pair of bad guys, Cortex and Uka Uka, end up getting stuck in ice, leading to the opening bits of Twinsanity. The fact there is actually some Crash Bandicoot story continuity is the coolest part about the whole thing. About a year ago, I took a bit of a different look at one of my favorite childhood franchises, Crash Bandicoot. As much as I love that orange marsupial and some of his games, when you really look at the entire franchise, oh, that boy has been through some tough times. Like, immediately after Naughty Dog no longer handled these games, Crash Bash happened. And relax, I'm not gonna go on a big Crash Bash hate fest here. It's a fine enough minigame collection, but it was pretty obvious that quality control stopped being as much of a priority here. Seriously, what is this Kiddy Kong's drunken uncle looking thing? I never want to see this again. And yep, you called it. There are a few more rough patches in this franchise I want to look at before it's all said and done. Got them all right here. This should definitely be a time, alright. A time of which I don't think I should do it alone. Apparently it's like a Crash Bandicoot month or something like that. I think it's time that we phone a friend. Just kidding, the whole idea of calling someone that you're collabing with, that's really cliche. Realistically, we've been working on this for months, so... Caddy, you ready?
No, actually.
Awesome, and with that, I say we get started with... Okay, what'd you just say?
I've been working on my own Crash Bandicoot videos for a while now, so I haven't had time to look at any of the games that you're going to be talking about.
Alright, fair enough. Actually, since you're not all that familiar with these games, I could just, like, show them to you and show you what you've been missing out on. This'll be interesting. I'm digging this. Could I, real quick, borrow your slaughter gun? I could actually use that.
Absolutely not! Get your own.
Noted. Let's get started.
Crash Bandicoot on Game Boy Advance sounds like a recipe for disaster. A good rule of thumb is portable version of console game equals bad, but I'll be damned if these games are really good. Well, kinda good. Rather than focusing on being original, the two games simply remix themes from the classic games and makes new level designs around them, and even cooler, these games were developed by Vicarious Visions, the guys responsible for the Sane trilogy and also Crash Oh no.
Another Crash game that doesn't get enough credit is Crash of the Titans. Not an awesome game by any means, but despite being more of a brawler than a platformer featuring a weird, tribal, tattooed Crash, it's still a worthwhile playthrough. And you can see where I'm going with this Crash of the Titans on Game Boy Advance. Oh boy. Okay, yep, this is gonna be a bit rough. So the plot is pretty similar to the console game. Aku Aku has been kidnapped, Cortex is gonna take over the world, they somehow expect us to believe that Uka Uka can talk without a mouth, Dingodile is here. What? He wasn't in the console game, but they put him in this one. It was weird he wasn't in the console game anyway, because he's one of the best characters in the series, but he's in... Okay, this game has that going for it.
Oh wow, 1 second in and this already looks way worse than the actual Crash GBA games.
Oh, it controls a lot worse too, don't you worry there.
Everything here just looks rough. The sprites are trying to pretend to be 3D models and that doesn't work. The music is annoying too. This short loop is driving me insane. Insane. Oh, Cortex on level 1 with blue hair? How'd they get that wrong?
And with that, Aku Aku is saved, and now we can finally jack enemies again. Well, this is weird. The crystals return, but they're used for invincibility instead. Okay. The invincibility lasted all of 2 seconds. Incredible.
I'll believe you that the console game is pretty good, but this version looks bland and repetitive. All I've seen you do is walk to the right and mindlessly bash enemies with no challenge whatsoever. Levels go on for far too long with no interesting set pieces. This is the type of game that parents get their kids that asked for Crash of the Titans but didn't know it was actually on a home console. And now he's using Aku Aku on a jet ski and a bit looking like Mario is missing. Alright, can we move on, please? Thank you.
Gladly. Now we have Crash of the Titans DS. Oh boy, here we go again. Okay, you know what? This is a nice touch. The title screen is a throwback to Crash 1. That's pretty cool. And honestly, as ready as I was to trash this game to Kingdom Come, it's actually kinda good. The opening cutscene this time is animated in a 3D space, and is even fully voice acted. And, oh my god, it's Crash running down a corridor like the original games. It just has the whole beat 'em up and jacking enemies mechanics, but it's actually fun here. The differences between this and the GBA version are just, wow. You get rewarded for finding collectibles, levels are more varied thematically, there are these bonus side-scrolling rooms, also like the original games. Wow. I'm stunned.
That's pretty crazy, honestly. How is nobody else talking about this game? I certainly don't massively approve of the changes Crash took with this Titan reboot stuff, but for what they were given, this looks surprisingly solid. There are even sections where you get to play as Nina on her quest to transform little woodland creatures into giant monsters. I like it. I like it a lot. And didn't the sequel get a DS port too?
Yeah, it did actually. After being pleasantly surprised with the Crash of the Titans DS, I am more than ready to feel that way about Mind Over Mutant. Okay, the title screen is a single JPEG now. Oh no. Well, I guess all the budget here went into making this helmet model spin. Okay, so obviously the cutscenes are way worse here. But you know what? Crash doesn't need to have a really good story anyway. The gameplay is where it shines. Oh no.
A side-scroller now. Why? Wow, this looks so much worse. Isn't the DS a console known for poor handling of full 3D games? How is the full 3D game the good one and the side-scroller the bad one?
Your guess is as good as mine. This is honestly terrible. The level design is more mind-numbing than Titan's GBA. The combat is more repetitive as well. The mutants are useless. Have you ever just like had a game that's so bad that you physically couldn't bring yourself to play more of it? Yeah, that's this game right here. I would love to keep playing this and see what the rest of it has to offer. Believe you me, I am telling the truth here. I just can't do it. So Crash Bandicoot has quite a bit of a pedigree in the kart racing department. Crash Team Racing, fantastic. That game is so good, even now, it's still so awesome. Crash Nitro Kart, not as awesome as the original game was, but still a good time if you want the original game, but it just looks a bit better. So when we were promised a third game of this genre, I was pretty interested. And then, color me shocked to start platforming before I ever step foot in a car. What? Hold on a second. Yeah, okay, that's not what this is. This is really weird. So Crash and the crew got thrown into this big amusement park filled with racetracks, but you actually get to fully explore the park. Collecting a bunch of coins, taking on quests, doing some platforming, knocking the hell out of some NPCs. It's not that bad, actually. What in the hell was that? It's a diorama. Okay, cause oh, that's sick.
There's a bunch of these throughout the park, and honestly, these just make me super uncomfortable. It's just Crash dying violent deaths. Comedy? Ah, hello citizen, how are you enjoying the park today?
Can you believe how much the souvenirs cost?
There's a handful of weird carnival games too. Like here you shoot flying birds with chickens. What? I played this game for about an hour before even thinking about doing a race. And I enjoyed my time too, that's the thing, it's very weird. Just because I could, I really tried to prolong the time it took before I got to the first race, and honestly, it turns out that was for the best. The racing is pretty bad. There's this brand new clashing mechanic that transforms the game from Mario Kart 64 to Double Dash on the fly. At the push of a button right next to someone else's vehicle, you just merge into one. And despite having some really bizarre story with some sort of hell creature that this thing is, nothing explains why you can do this. You just can now. The problem is though, your partner has unlimited ammo, and they're a good shot, and you can use the clash at any time. So it is a guaranteed first place because your partner will just shoot anybody who comes in your way. Or you know what, better yet, just let the computer drive for you and at the last minute just get away and take all the credit. The game tries to be clever, like you can unlock a track's shortcut by finding a secret switch in the overworld, but as a kart racer, yeah, it's bad.
Tag team racing is so weird. It's not necessarily a terrible game, it's just a bad racing game and a bad platformer mixed up with it. But wouldn't that make it a bad game since it's being marketed as a racing game and I'm having more fun watching Crash die? I'm a very bad person.
You are sick in the head, my friend. Huh, this is weird. There's a chicken that you can talk to. Collect the chickens before the time runs out. Okay, I'm up for a collect-a-thon. This should be, oh my god, the park has been infiltrated with T-posing chickens. What a racing game. Well, I can certainly say that my mind has been awakened here. What did you think about all this, Caddy?
Yep, I'm going to stick with the Insane trilogy, thank you very much. I wanted this first Bandicoot month I was doing to go perfectly, so I suppose it's a good thing I knew about these games beforehand.
There were a bunch of Crash games that were released on mobile devices, and a surprising amount of cancelled games as well, so I'm not really done with the franchise just yet. Crash Bandicoot is such an iconic early 3D platformer. You know, while Mario went ahead and made popular the idea of collect-a-thon platformers, which led to the world being treated to dozens, if not hundreds, of adventures over the years that throw characters into large worlds to gather any trinket imaginable that's even remotely shiny, surprisingly enough, there's still not much out there quite like Crash Bandicoot. We've certainly gotten plenty of linear 3D platformers as time has gone on, but that hallway-based design that the orange marsupial made famous? Yeah man, Crash is still your only real source for that. I suppose that's due to how limiting this idea could be. You know, there's no massive imaginative landscapes, you typically only move forward and backward, but maybe side-scrolling if you really want to get crazy. I guess developers just never really knew how to take advantage of it. Even when you look past the original trilogy, easily where that gameplay model shined the brightest, we got Wrath of Cortex after that, which definitely, you know, it tried to do the same thing. Just didn't really do a great job of it. Still can't get over how Cortex looks like he has a million teeth. Crash of the Titans kind of followed a similar style as well, more specifically the DS version though. That feels a whole lot more classic than its console counterpart in my opinion. And of course, we also have Crash 4. It's about time, going back to what made that series awesome in the first place, and that is really sweet. But yeah, that's about it. After Wrath of Cortex, Crash would go pseudo-open world with Twinsanity. The original developers at Naughty Dog would go even bigger with Jak and Daxter. If anything, I always felt like the first Sly Cooper was a great adaptation of that hallway level design. But even then, admittedly, it's a bit of a stretch, and it doesn't even matter because it was abandoned in the sequel. But I was determined to find some games out there. They had to exist, and especially with Crash 4 on the horizon, I was definitely in the mood for it. Which, by the way, if you want to see some coverage on that game when it releases, you're going to want to subscribe, because I'm totally going to do that, and I would appreciate it. But there had to be something. There had to be games that must have released back in the day that were either influenced by or absolutely ripped off Crash Bandicoot. There just had to be. I found them. Oh yeah, and you know, you really should do a Crash ripoff video. That's such a really good idea. What could possibly go wrong? Oh man, what do you mean you're not gonna cover Barbie Explorer on PS1? Look at that, it's totally a Crash Bandicoot ripoff. I'm sorry, did you not see Eminem shell-shocked here? My plate looks mighty full enough as it is. They're all licensed games. That's kind of weird. There is this one game on the Dreamcast that's very clearly a Crash Bandicoot clone, and to my knowledge, it's not licensed to anything else, so that's nice, but I don't own a Dreamcast, so I gotta stick to what I got. Fun. This is gonna be an absolute disaster no matter how I start looking at these, so to all of you massive Lilo and Stitch PS1 fans out there, you must exist. There has to be someone out there. Let's get this started. Terrible, thanks for asking. Pessimism aside, we might actually have something here. Disney games on PS1 usually have a very distinct charm to them. Toy Story 2, Bug's Life, Hercules, we got some absolute classics here. Perhaps Lilo and Stitch will be one too. All of those retro games that throw in scenes from the movie in such a compressed nature as a means to pull the story along, I am all about that. The fact that no one's brought this game up in the same conversation as those previous games makes me worry a little bit, but hey, let's check it out. Okay, so yeah, this is exactly what I mean when I talk about a Crash Bandicoot ripoff. We got basic point A to point B hallway platforming, we got the occasional side scroller, there's sometimes a chase level, there are some collectibles to get your hands on along the way, things you gotta break to get to them. Stitch even attacks by spinning. This is pretty shameless. He can spin, burp, roll into a ball and just crash through everything in his path. Lilo, on the other hand, can perform voodoo magic, which barely ever works. These plants are literally the worst thing ever. And also, oh, yeah, that's certainly one way to take down anyone who stands in your path. Just summon a big dude from the heavens. That's how I handle my problems. Something this game does that Crash didn't actually is throwing you into these little hub worlds in between levels that connect together all of the other levels across the entire Hawaiian island. This is pretty cool, honestly. I'm so familiar with those level portals from the Crash games, which is totally effective, but having these little cooldown locations that can lead to a few different stages is really refreshing to see, even if there's really nothing to do in them. Okay, we got aliens, yeah, that makes sense. There's the big detective dude, I remember him. Myrtle is in here as a boss that you have to race, and yeah, that totally makes sense. I definitely don't recall stone golems tossing lava rocks at a small girl trying to kill her from the movie. Yeah, no, gotta tell you, that part does not ring a bell. Oh, there are so many of them too, and they all go down the same exact way. You just run around and then hit them in the back over and over again until they die. Why is Hawaii suddenly cursed with all of these rock monsters? This is definitely a problem. Yeah, I don't know, man. Lilo and Stitch is fine. It's inoffensive. It only takes about an hour and a half to complete. There's only one level that actually gave me trouble. It ends kind of out of nowhere too, actually, but hey, we do have some hallways here, so it's a Crash ripoff, alright. I guess it is better having a decent game than a terrible one, so there's that. Lilo and Stitch PS1, it's not terrible, so I can rest easy with that one. Next up, we have Donald Duck going quackers. This time for the PlayStation 2. We're on upgraded hardware here. This should be pretty interesting. It's not going to be that much better, is it? The story here is pretty straightforward. While doing some undercover intel by the looks of things, Daisy Duck gets captured, and it's all being broadcasted live on television. So of course, Donald makes it his duty to save her. There's this one dude though, Gladstone, he uses the teleporter before Donald gets to do so. So for him to get his shot, he has to travel to all of these different lands to gather a bunch of shiny objects to boost the machine's power. It's as run-of-the-mill as a damsel in distress story we can get here. I like to think in the grand timeline, this game takes place before Kingdom Hearts. You know, she started off working as a TV broadcaster, and then she becomes royalty. That's goals right there. Okay, yep, here we go. This is a whole lot more just straight up Crash Bandicoot. We may be on a newer console now, but nah, this is pretty by the bones classic Crash. Honestly, to a fault. There's like nothing original going on here. You have hallways, the side scrollers, the once in a while chase levels, and once you know the main gist of things, which doesn't take very long, nothing really changes all the way up until the end credits. There's only one main thing that kinda sticks out, and it's this special move mechanic. You jump on 3 enemies in a row, you press a button to go into a special mode, and then you dial in a specific button combo to get this little cutscene to play out. And that's it. They do nothing. You get invincibility for like 2 seconds, and that's kinda neat, but it doesn't help you in the slightest. I don't understand why this is a thing. This has to be one of the major draws of the game, I guess. There are so many of these that you unlock on your journey. Am I actually expected to memorize all of these combos they throw at me? There's this training area where you can check out existing combos and just see what they do, but this adds nothing. Spicy golf? I have no idea what that means, and quite frankly, I'm terrified. Alright, let's do something a bit more unconventional here, something no one else has ever done before. Let's directly compare Donald Duck and Lilo and Stitch. Both of these are simply bland attempts at recapturing that same vibe the Crash Bandicoot games are so known for. Those titles kept things interesting constantly with the varied locales, tough main challenges with even tougher optional ones, occasional vehicle segments to really spice things up, as well as some humor. Crash legitimately dying is one of the funniest parts of the entire franchise. If Donald loses a life, well, he just gets kinda mildly upset. Oh man, he should take a chill pill. And if Lilo loses a life, we get to see a little girl cry as the screen fades to black. Finally, this is what the video game industry has been missing. I guess by pure virtue of having more frequent bad hit detection, Lilo and Stitch is definitely the more challenging game. Donald Duck Goin' Quackers is such a cakewalk by comparison. It's not the easiest game in the world. I did die a few times, but I think that's just because my brain was going numb. All I remember doing is holding forward, pressing the jump button a couple times, and then the credits rolled. Not a good look. So, for the sake of argument, I also wanted to check out the game on the Nintendo 64, just to see if it was more or less the same game, but not as good looking. I mean, for one, the cutscenes are actually done in-game, and there's full voice acting here. Hearing real voices come out of a Nintendo 64 game has always been pretty cool, so honestly, I love this. Oh man, and this UI, it so screams Rayman 2 here. It actually turns out that both of these games were made by different teams at Ubisoft. And it totally shows. Then we dive into the game, and I don't know if it's just because I'm a big sucker for low polygon 3D and N64 platformers, but I actually like this a whole lot more than the PS2 version. It controls just as well. The level designs are actually very different. The colors seem to be a whole lot more vibrant to me. The hub worlds are a little bit more interesting in my opinion. I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but the older version of this game, I would actually say is better. I will say though, there are no special moves in this version, but really, I can only use the phrase "the lack of spicy golf" as a game's negative so many times. I can't speak for the PS1 version, but considering that is bound to also be a low polygon 3D platformer, I'm probably gonna say it's better as well. Good on you, low poly Donald. You really redeemed yourself. Listen, much credit to Disney here. They really tried. Okay, well, I shouldn't say really tried. They did try to capitalize on Crash Bandicoot's success with 2 of their franchises, so that's kind of cool. The games weren't very good, but hey, still worth a shot. With those 2 out of the way, though, I guess that means there's 1 more left. I'll do an Eminem's game. I wish these guys were sponsoring me. I'm doing this for free. This is gonna be the death of me. Brought to us by the fine folks at everybody's favorite video game studio, Boston Animation, here we have Eminem Shell Shocked. Oh yeah, man, nothing like a good old quality JPEG menu to really set my expectations flowing.
Well, my yellow fellow, it's time these M&Ms had a little R&R.
R&R? Is that a new candy?
Okay. Alright, you know what? I hate that I think that's funny. So it turns out Eminem minis are going out of control and they're about to sabotage the entire candy factory. And since Red doesn't want to do anything about it, it's up to you, as Yellow, to save the day. What is this audio design? Those boxers are so loud! Oh yeah, also we're driving, by the way, so kudos, we have a vehicle segment to start things off. Yellow Eminem knows how to drive. That's a scary thought. The real problem, though, is nobody else can. Oh my god, people are doing supersonic speeds, driving in the wrong lanes, insane, out of nowhere U-turns, crashes happening left and right. This is a disaster movie. Crazy Taxi got nothing on this. The one positive, though, is I can no longer hear anything because of all the bleeding going on in my ear. So that's something. Oh, I am so done with all of the pain and torment. When is the level gonna end? Oh, it just ends. It just cuts right to the menu. I didn't edit that. It's that jarring. Oh, hey, another driving level. Cool. Can we fast forward to the actual platforming, please? All right, this is more like it. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Here's the Crash Bandicoot ripoff hallway level design that I've been dying to see. Oh man, okay, yeah, this is so shameless. Yellow can do a leg spin, you got boxes to break with items inside. I can't believe Eminem's Shell Shocked is the closest game to Crash Bandicoot that's not Crash Bandicoot. I can't believe that. Oh, and in case you had any doubts, yeah, the game controls terribly too. Crash had such a fantastic level of flow to how he played. That's one of the reasons why Crash 2 and 3 in particular are so good, even to this day. Yellow is just so damn stiff by comparison, and there's a total lack of depth perception too, making all of the platforming way more annoying than it has any right to be. This is a video game starring some of the most famous candy characters of all time. I know I'm gonna sound foolish for saying this, but I expected more. There is no variety in the level themes either. The entire adventure after the beginning driving segment is just factory level after factory level. You cycle through different color schemes every now and then, and somehow I guess that's enough. Okay, maybe I just have to calm down. Let me just hit these boxes real quick. Oh, my mistake, those were ghost boxes. Should've saw that coming. The frame rate is also very inconsistent. The game runs terribly. All things considered, this is such a not fun game to play.
Oops. Uh-oh.
What? There was nothing there. There was nothing there! Yellow just said, eh, screw it. Guess I'll just die. Oh man, I take it back about the variety. We do have a rocket ship level. Oh, this is gonna make me sick. What the, is that a chicken? Oh. Well, it was a chicken. After every chunk of 3 levels, we do get to watch a cutscene, and honestly, it's the best part of the entire game. Let's be real here, the Eminem's personality is part of the reason why this brand has been going so strong for decades. So in that context, these are fine.
Where are your hard hats?
I have an unusually hard shell.
Did not need to know that.
When I want comments from the peanut gallery, I'll fill out a purchase order.
That was pretty good. You may not believe me when I say this, but Eminem Shell Shocked on the PS1 is not very good. I know, truly a shocker to us all. Eminem's got nothing on Lilo and Stitch and Donald Duck, I can tell you that much. Listen, while those games may have been anywhere from average to whatever, there's nothing inherently wrong with these games trying to rip off the success of Crash Bandicoot, but at least give us something decent out of it. This is a sin on humanity that proves that we are further away from world peace than we could ever fathom. In doing my research for this topic, I found out that according to the Eminem's video game wiki, which apparently exists, Shell Shocked is actually a remake of The Lost Formulas, which was released a year earlier on computers. And there is something genuinely amazing and hilarious about this being considered a remake. The Eminem's fan base and the video game fan base. There's a lot of possible crossovers there. A lot of market value can be seized with this opportunity. This was not the way to do it. Just stick to Crash Bandicoot. I mean, you already knew I was gonna say that before you went into this video, but it rings true, man. I can't believe these were the best games I could find, and they didn't even come close to matching their inspiration's quality. Maybe the Barbie game is kinda better? I'm never saying that sentence again in my life.
I have an unusually hard shell.